This is the Thursday, July 9th meeting of the Community Oversight Advisory Board. And we're glad that you're here. Want to remind you that this is the only board of its type in the country, that we're doing incredibly important work, and the people who are doing this work are really valuable people volunteering their time, trying to make Portland and perhaps the USA a better place in terms of community police relations. At my first meeting, I talked about the elephant in the room being a lack of trust between all of the groups. And I want to revisit that only to say that when I said that, I didn't say I was going to fix it. And I need to put a tagline on it. We are going to fix it. It is our job to reach across those difficult places and engender trust by talking with people, by telling our stories, by being kind, by being compassionate and empathetic. And I know we can do it. First, I want to introduce a new person on this team, Mandy Hood, who is here and who is the new administrative person for the COCO team. Welcome, Mandy.
Thank you.
Yes, you can welcome her. Just
Thank you.
And I want to reintroduce Amy Ruiz, who is here that you all know, who's held down the fort and done a lot of the holding things together. And then there's Dennis, who is here from Chicago, who is a part of the COCO team and who is, do you want to say anything, Dennis?
No, it's good to be here. Thank you.
All right. So, Amy, would you take us through where things are, please?
Housekeeping notes. Materials and a sign-in sheet are out in the hall. If you'd like to sign up to testify, please make a note on that sheet. We have food in the back of the room. Please help yourself. There is now water as well. If you came in late, it was in the freezer. Restrooms are out in the lobby, your first left and down the hall. We do have a toy box if any children arrive or if anybody else needs to play with something while you're listening. We also have 2 new voting members of the COAB that Kathleen can introduce. And I think that's it. Brad Taylor is not here tonight. If you have any accommodations issues, please come see me and I'll be happy to help.
Hi, I would like for the 2 new members to introduce themselves. You want to start, Tom?
Tom Steenson. I'm not sure what to say. I just
Well,
happy not to be an alternate anymore.
oh, welcome, Tom.
Lanford, and I also was an alternate, and I'm happy to sit at the table with you folks again. Thanks.
All right, welcome, Laquita. Now, remember, when you speak, raise your paddle so the guys in the back have an easier time. And Tim is now smiling at me for reminding you.
Sorry, one more housekeeping note. I apologize. V and Amy are on the phone, which is why I'm sitting over here near the phone. I know there's at least one point where V wants to weigh in, and I'll be listening in and looking at email to unmute them when they want to say something, and we'll check in with them occasionally. So they should be able to hear us, but if you hear a voice from over here in the corner, that's what's going on.
Our first agenda item is to review and discuss and perhaps approve bylaw amendments for the COAB bylaws. And I think, Bud, are you?
Great. Okay. So I'm going to read the bylaw amendments, and then Bud
Okay.
will do the discussion.
Okay.
So the first, there's, I think, 4 points here. Unfortunately, my copy is not in color, but most of the language that's in the packet is additional language to what was originally in the subcommittee section of the bylaws. And I will read the new text for consideration, and then Bud will recap the conversation that's happened at the executive committee about these amendments that are proposed. So right now, the subcommittee section of the bylaws say that the COAB shall appoint subcommittees to address specific aspects of the COAB's work as determined by the COAB. The proposed addition says that the creation of new subcommittees or changes to existing subcommittees, including a description and scope, may be proposed to the executive committee by the COCL or by a majority vote of the voting COAB members of an existing subcommittee. The executive committee shall vote to forward a recommendation to the full COAB for a vote of approval.
Thank you, Amy. So that amendment was created to specifically address the discussion around the accountability work. There had been a discussion as to whether or not that should be added to the existing DSUFCS group or put aside in its own subcommittee. So as we stand, we're now just trying to create the process by which we can do that. We don't have a process at this moment.
Questions, comments?
Any questions or comments from the phone?
Yeah, it's quite. Can you hear me, or how is the sound for everybody?
It's good.
Okay, good, because I can barely make you guys out, unfortunately. So I'm just doing the best I can. I may ask people to repeat stuff. I don't know why. It's probably some interference from one of the aux lines or something like that. Anyway, on point number one, I'm curious, was this COCL or COAB driven? Was it generated by the COCL or was it generated by the COAB Executive Committee?
It's an issue that's been there in terms of not having a process and a clear definition of subcommittees and how they are established. I think I talked with,
And with who? And who's talking here?
this is Kathleen Sadat talking, V.
Oh, okay. Well, that's what's been happening the entire time. So it's a little confusing to sort of hear it yet again, because this is, from my understanding, information at least, if not from February, but most definitely from the March 12th meeting, as I understood it. And it's a practice and pattern that each of the subcommittees has used.
What we don't have at this time, V, this is Kathleen Sadat again. What we don't have at this time is that process included and documented in our bylaws. So that's what this is.
Go ahead.
That's what this is about.
And V, to clarify, we're looking at the first part of the bylaw amendment to amend or create a new subcommittee, not the voting.
So whoever's speaking right now, the feedback is so tremendous. So maybe stand back a little bit from where you're speaking so I can get the transmission more clearly. I didn't understand anything that you just said, whoever's speaking.
Sorry.
Oh, were you talking to me? I thought,
I'll try that again, and somebody else may need to repeat it so we don't have the feedback. But what I might be hearing is that there's confusion over which piece of the bylaw amendments we're voting on or discussing at the moment, and we're really looking at just the first paragraph, which is about creating or amending.
Right, yeah. That's what I'm looking at too. I'm looking at the first paragraph too. I was just wondering, was it COCL or COAB driven? And now I understand that it's from Kathleen Sadat, apparently. And if I'm misunderstanding, just let me know. And I just wanted to be clear, and I think it's clear to the majority of what I remember who are serving, that that's a process that has been being used definitely after March 12th meeting.
okay.
So I don't understand why it has to be sort of ingrained in the bylaws.
Mr. Jackson.
I don't think we're going to get too far today in our meeting if it keeps going this way.
I know. Phil,
This is Philip speaking. Can you hear me?
People in a tunnel or people muffled up? Can somebody just?
So basically, I mean, we just want to know, we know in general how the subcommittees are established, but the bylaws, it's not yet in the bylaws there clearly. So the idea is we want to put it in the bylaws just for the future, if there's other subcommittees that want to be established, that it's, the idea is clearly laid out in the bylaws. And that's really the goal of the amendment.
Okay. Any other comments on the bylaws? Any questions about the proposed bylaw, this section?
Is that for number 1 or is that for number 2 as well? Because the way you're speaking, it goes to number 1 and number 2, just to be clear.
Just the first paragraph is what we'll be discussing right now.
Okay.
So can I just, this is Ine, can I just interrupt for a second? I also can't understand anything that's being said. So I don't know where the phone is located, but 90% of what was just said just sounded like static to me. So if there's something that we can do about that, that would be very helpful.
I agree with Ine, and from my experience with working with audio equipment, it's cross-line feedback. And it's
Tim, is there anything you can do to help us with their ability to hear on the speakerphone?
They can put that mechanism closer to that speaker cabinet is the only thing I can think of right off the top of my head that would give you quickly. Yeah. That's where the sound is coming from.
Okay.
If I may speak, can anybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm having a terrible, I'm not able to understand anybody. Either people sound 250 yards away in a tunnel, or they sound right over my head with a bunch of static and
Okay.
Like 18 people listening.
We have just moved the speakerphone closer to the speaker in an effort to improve your ability to hear what we're saying. Is this any better?
That sounded pretty good.
Okay, good.
But, if this
So
continues,
we need to move on and handle the bylaws process.
I'd like to make a motion so that everybody that's included in the COAB can be present, so that we can talk and have participation and full participation and discussion about these very critical issues on both 1 and 2.
Go ahead. Sharon?
This is Sharon Myron, and I don't know if we have to first vote on V's motion, but I would move that we approve the bylaws as amended.
We have.
Second.
What? Whoa. Discussion on that, please. Ava?
Speaking as a member of the executive committee, I would just like to point out that the language in the proposed amendments is language that was agreed to by the COAB members who serve on the executive committee, together with the COCO, the chair.
Okay. Is there a second for the motion?
Yeah, second.
Discussion? Call the question? All in favor? Right, I got some discussion here from Philip.
We're taking the vote.
Oh, the vote. All in favor? Okay. Hands up. All right. Opposed? Abstentions?
Can we ask them?
What? Yes.
And what is your vote on the phone?
Well, I had a question, actually, and I was trying to get anybody's attention. But I really do object to the process at this point, because neither V nor Ime, and I know I'm not speaking for Ime, I'm most certainly just speaking for myself, but I don't feel any sense of participation. I cannot understand what everybody's saying. So I would really move and suggest to the other COAB members, if this isn't a critical issue, to simply just wait until the next general meeting where hopefully my knee will be
It
better.
is a critical issue, V. We have it on our agenda. We have a quorum here to
Can
vote
I
the
just-
bylaws in, and we need to try to make better adjustments for you in the future. We have done what we can do this evening. I am really sorry that you're unable to hear well.
And to communicate as a voting member. What's important to me is to be able to have that time to speak when I want to speak and not to be cross-talked over, despite the fact that I'm on the phone or not, and to have full participation. So I'm going to again ask the other general COAB members and the executive members if we can simply wait, if this isn't a terribly pressing issue, to wait until the next general COAB meeting.
V, you do not have that privilege right now. I'm sorry. We have voted and it's passed, and we're now going to move on to the next agenda item.
Well,
This is Ime. I would really appreciate it. When we made a decision to allow members of the COAB to participate using the phone so that folks who could not get there could participate, the decision that we made was that that was full participation. So if we could just have some sort of agreement that when people are speaking, whether they are speaking on the phone or they are speaking in the room, that there is no crosstalk, so that everybody can be heard and everybody has equal space.
Okay? Next agenda item, Judy Prosper. Thank you very much for coming. Judy's going to talk to us about being public officials, information that could be helpful. You want to stand up? You want to sit down? You could sit at the end of a table and take a mic and face the audience.
Thank you. Good evening. Excuse me. My name is Judy Prosper. I'm a deputy city attorney for the city of Portland. I have held this position for 10 months, having recently moved here from New York. What I do for the city attorney's office is advise several bureaus as to civil rights implications of various actions that they're taking. I do a lot of community outreach, like coming out tonight to this COAB board meeting and advise the COAB board and executive board. I also draft laws such as the Ban-the-Box ordinance, which is something that is hopefully coming before council soon. So that's a little bit about me. I am a public official, and as such, I am subject to the City of Portland's Code of Ethics, which is contained in Chapter 1.03. I think COAB members have a copy of some of the things I'm going to discuss, and I believe copies were put outside if you want to follow along. So a city official means any elected official, employee, appointee to a board or commission, or citizen volunteer authorized to act on behalf of the city of Portland, Oregon. Ethics means positive principles of conduct. Some ethical requirements are enforced by federal, state, or local law. Others rely on training or an individual's desire to do the right thing. The provisions of this chapter, which are not elsewhere enforced by law, shall be considered advisory only. So COAB members are public officials. The COAB was created by the city under the settlement agreement as a body that would be the community liaison part of the COCL research and compliance team. COAB is supported by the city and uses city resources for its work. Just as COAB is governed by public meetings and public records laws, so too are the members of COAB governed by the city and state ethics laws. City officials have special powers, along with a special obligation to act only on behalf of the public. So as you know, the COAB is an important part of the settlement agreement, And it's so important that COAB members and meetings be COAB meetings be a place where members of the public feel welcome and know that all views can be openly expressed. No action by any COAB member or the COAB as a whole should make any member of the public feel disenfranchised. And a quote from the code that kind of encompasses all this is, city officials do not give the appearance of impropriety. So now I'll turn to the actual handout in front of you, which is, as I said, chapter 1.03, the city's code of ethics. And I didn't print out the whole code. I only printed the definitions. And then those are the first 2 pages. And then the second 2 pages are some explanations and examples of that sort of are relevant to this group. So the first definitional piece is trust. The purpose of the city government is to serve the public. City officials treat their office as a public trust. The city's powers and resources are used for the benefit of the public rather than any official's personal benefit. City officials ensure public respect by avoiding even the appearance of impropriety. The public interest includes protecting the rights of underrepresented minorities. I'm not going word for word, I'm just kind of skipping over what I think are the most salient points. Citizens must have a fair and equal opportunity to express their views to city officials, like COAB members. City officials do not give the appearance of impropriety or personal gain by accepting personal gifts. So the second part of the definition is objectivity, and that's 1.03.030. City officials avoid bias or favoritism and respect cultural differences as part of decision-making. On the accountability, that's 0.040. City officials exercise their authority with open meetings and public records. 0.050, leadership. City officials do not exploit loopholes. Officials avoid discreditable personal conduct and are personally honest. So I didn't want to read every single one, but these are sort of the highlights of the code of ethics under which you are all governed. So on the explanation and examples, I just want you to know all of this information is available with much more clarity and in its entirety on the auditor's website. And that website is contained on page 1 of this handout. And it's a really good resource. You can click over to various things, and there are lots of explanations and examples. But I just picked a few that I thought were relevant for our purposes today. So on page 3, explanations and examples, gifts. City officials do not give the appearance of impropriety, and this is a very common theme, as you can see, or personal gain by accepting personal gifts. In general, personal gifts should be refused or returned with a friendly but firm message that city officials are not allowed to receive gifts. A personal gift, lunch, or entertainment gift under $50 in value may be legal under state law, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But under the Portland City Code, it states no amount is too small to be ethically questionable. And the guiding principle is, would I receive this gift, meal, entertainment, or the like if I did not hold a city position? So city officials as representatives of the city, or while conducting official business on behalf of the city, may accept gifts for the city. But these gifts, as presented, become the property of the city of Portland. And another way to describe that is, when you leave office, you have to leave the gift behind. They're not your personal property. I think that's enough on gifts. Actually, in the bulleted rectangle, it talks more specifically about the state law as it stands and how, and I'll talk about how our city law differs, as I mentioned earlier. ORS 244.020 defines a gift. And under state law, it is anything $50 or below can be received from any one person during a calendar year. from someone who could reasonably be known to have legislative or administrative interest before the state. As I mentioned earlier, our city code talks about any amount. There is a $25 reporting threshold, but that $25 reporting threshold is sort of not meant to get $24 gifts over several times. It's basically an administrative rule. I'll give you an example. One of the officers received a DVD on a civil rights issue, and they looked up the gift, they looked up the DVD, it was worth $22.99, it didn't need to be reported, and that public official recorded the DVD actually as a gift, and is going to be used for staff retreats and purposes of the like. That city official cannot take that DVD home. So on to now another public official topic, and that is prayer. So on page 4, there's a little sort of legal analysis, very, very gentle legal analysis. City officials ensure public respect by avoiding, again, even the appearance of impropriety. There are a few seminal Supreme Court cases that govern this. In the case of Lynch v. Donnelly from 1984, Justice O'Connor concurred, and a quote that I liked from this is, "Endorsement sends a message to non-adherents that they are outsiders, not full members of the political community, and an accompanying message to adherents that they are insiders, favored members of the political community." And that is just to say, again, back to this necessity of all members of the public feeling like any message they have to deliver to this COAB and any community board or any public officials, they can feel that they can do so freely and without thinking, well, I'm going to be favored or disfavored, possibly because of what I believe or don't believe. A more recent Supreme Court case, Town of Greece, New York versus Galloway, which was decided last summer, held, and this is something you should know, that legislative prayer at the opening of town board meetings did not violate the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. So prayer is allowable at public meetings. This particular Supreme Court decision applies only to meetings of local legislative bodies, like city council, town councils, etc. A school board, for example, is distinct from a local legislative body because it's affiliated with public school and school-age children, and often children attend these. So local school boards, for example, are subject to a higher standard. This board is sort of one of those not addressed boards, so it sort of lies somewhere between. But the tenets of whether or not prayer can happen at a public meeting are sort of threefold. One is that the entire body needs to vote on having the prayer happen, and what kind of prayer it's going to be. Is it going to be a certain denomination? Is it going to be rotating denominations? Is it going to be 5 minutes or 20 minutes? Is it going to be at every meeting? So the entire body needs to vote on that. The second tenet is that anybody who's required to be at the meeting can absent themselves during the prayer, which is why it usually happens at the beginning of a session. So let's say this meeting starts at 6:30. The body could decide at 6:15 the prayer will start, or 6:25, so that those who are required to be here or members of the public who wish to fully participate in the meeting are not required to sit through the prayer. So, and this Town of Greece decision goes on to say, the court's decision in no way requires a community member to participate in prayer or remain in the room during the prayer. In fact, it would be unconstitutional for a public official to require a community member to participate in the prayer. Some examples in Oregon, because again, there are places where bodies have decided that they do want to pray. And some examples in Oregon are the city of Estacada. In February 2015, the council voted unanimously to start its public meetings with prayer. Redmond, in 2006, a 6-1 vote for pre-meeting prayer. And in Bend, however, councilors do not hold a prayer, and there's no immediate plan to start. Thank you to my lovely law clerk in the office for adding that one. So that sort of concludes my formal presentation. I'm totally here and open to questions for you. I'm always available. If you have a question afterwards, you can pass it through Kathleen or Amy, and it will get to me and I will respond. Thanks. Dr. Sharon.
Sharon.
At the risk of getting us off track, and I'm willing to get us back on track and let this go, but it just begs the question, did someone bring up prayer at the opening of one of these meetings? It's just weird to bring that up, at the legal foundations behind that, if it's not been brought up to the COAB in general.
I'll let
It has
Kathleen speak to
been indirectly brought up to the COAB. It has, yes, it has been indirectly brought up as an issue for the COAB.
Senator Gordon.
Abel?
Thank you. Let me say, first of all, that I appreciate the presentation and the intent behind the presentation. What's missing is context. What are the, what is the situation or situations that have prompted the presentation? And again, I don't want to belabor the discussion any longer than it needs to be, but again, context would be very helpful for the record.
Go ahead.
Sure. Sure. At the last COAB meeting, which was about 2 weeks ago, in the wake of the tragedy of South Carolina, one of the COAB members, in the middle of the meeting, decided to have a moment of silence. It was spontaneous. A moment of silence, I believe it was 10 seconds, and then recited the 23rd Psalm. So not knowing that that was going to happen, it not having been on the agenda, there was some concern at, again, sort of the role of the board, and while, again, spontaneity of individuals is always welcome, but the board working together as a board and its obligations and putting things on the schedule and vetting those, the agenda items ahead of time and giving notice. So it was, again, just these little how to be a COAB member sessions. I know my colleague Ellen Osenak did one on public records, public meetings. So as issues come up, it's sort of our job to come in and help explain how things should go under the law. So that's that instance. And, the gifts.
The gifts.
Some members of the community very, very generously offered a copy to each member of this board and some other community boards that deal with police accountability. A copy of a book by a police accountability expert. And their generous thought was to give each member a copy of this book. And the overall cost, I believe, was about, when I looked it up, it was about worth $50 per book, and then an overall cost of about $1,300. So when the memo came to me at the last COAB meeting, I spoke to the community members and asked them to please hold off, because I was pretty certain that giving something of value, of that kind of value, to each member of the COAB would violate the code. And indeed, I did consult with the auditor and some colleagues in my office, and I'll get to you in a second, Mr. Steenson. I'm not ignoring you. Was advised that yes, indeed, a gift from a community member, that the books would be considered gifts, and such gifts could not be given to public officials. So actually, the chair of the COAB asked me to come in and give a little explanation. So that's your context. Mr. Steenson?
So if I understand correctly, if the value of the book is less than $50, the community members could give them to individual COAB members or others working on advisory boards or councils.
The state law states it's a $50 limit. The city code talks about any amount, and my understanding is the way that that works in practice under for Portland city officials is that it's really the $25 reporting threshold that is used as the standard for the city of Portland. But it does say any amount, so something of worth $5. The code also, the examples given in the code also talk to things like pens and pencils given out by someone who's trying to sell microphones or advertising. So it's really any amount, because again, we don't want people accepting $49 gifts and $24 gifts.
Well, the provision of the chapter, the Portland chapter of its code that you read says, the provisions of this chapter which are not elsewhere enforced by law shall be considered advisory only. So really, if the state law says $50, that's the amount. Isn't that correct?
That may technically be correct, but as a city official myself, having had to turn down several things under this rule, the city auditor, I went to the city auditor's office and received an opinion that stated that the $25 reporting requirement is what is expected of all city officials.
And one last point. And wouldn't it be okay if these community members who are trying to provide information and materials to help us do our job, if they gave it to the COCL or gave it to the city or gave it to the COAB as an organization, couldn't they then lend the books to the members of the COAB?
Actually, Mr. Steenson, at the executive board meeting that was discussed, we actually had some other conversations since then that I was going to come back to Ms. Sadat and the executive board members at the next meeting. There were several ideas put forth, and again, without speaking to the community members, I'll tell you, in advance to see how they feel about it. Some ideas came up. The first idea was to have a sort of lending library for COAB members. So maybe 3 books could be donated to the city. They would be checked in somewhere. They would be the property of, just to give an example, maybe the Office of Equity and Human Rights. And COAB members could go to this place and check out the books and use them, but they would have to return them. And so again, there's an administrative cost to doing this. And if one book, why not some other books? Earlier on in the process, several COAB members thought of different books that gave historical context to the work of the COAB. So the question would be then, who decides which books and how much administrative time that would take? So that was the first suggestion. And I'm not judging the suggestions, I'm just giving you another suggestion that came up, and again, I haven't had a chance to speak to the community members about this, was donating the books that were going to be gifted to the members to the Multnomah County Public Library, and letting COAB members know that they could go to any library and request to borrow the book. When I gave a short presentation during executive board, we talked about sort of, while we want the free flow of ideas, while we want all opinions on police accountability to be heard by the COAB board, something packaged in a nice book that you could take home with you is very different from listening to someone testify who may not have the funds to advance their idea in the same manner. That is, buying a book that COAB members could take home with them. So these are some of the ideas that were floating. This is something we'll address, I think, in executive board and come back to the COAB with.
Philip?
Tom, your question, I just kind of had a follow-up to. There's a lot of things to think about in regards to this, even if we do accept the gift from the community members, and that's an if. It means that we have to pay someone the administrative cost to take care of the books because we can't bring them home, we can't have them for ourselves. The city does own them from here on out, you know, and we can access them, but the city does own those resources. So it's a cost, and that's one of the issues. We also discussed that maybe a book might seem an educational and informational, but people, you know, the community perspective, other people might see that as influencing the COAB members or a conflict of interest or some sort of coercion. So that is another sensitive issue that we just wanted to bring up, the kind of perception of that, that we do want to be neutral. Something else was adding a link to access without having a physical copy. So having something that's accessible. So, I don't know, that was just something I wanted to talk about in response to your question.
Sure.
Thank you. I would echo what Philip said, and pointing out both the fact that it is not necessarily monetary amount. It is, there are two things. There's the perception of impropriety, and who is it that's making the decision as to what books are appropriate or are not appropriate for this body, and that there isn't a body to do that. And second of all, I see the analogy to, like, in medicine, you know, we can't, as physicians, we can't take a pen, we can't take anything, because even though it's, you know, or they've done pharmaceutical company's done a study that looks great, and you're like, yeah, well, this medication treats diabetes, why can't I have my pen? It's really that perception and the fact that subconsciously even that could be influential, rather than the monetary amount. So that would be my perspective on that.
Hey, Bill?
Okay. I think sometimes we can make things more complicated than they need to be. And I'm thinking of a friend of mine who's fond of saying, keep it simple, keep it simple. I am aware that the book that we're speaking about is titled, if I may, Madam Chair, put the title on record. Mm-hmm. It is The New World of Police Accountability, 2nd edition. The authors are Samuel Walker, Carol A. Archbold. It's from Sage Press, and the publication date is 2014, and again, it's Sage Publications. The people who wanted to gift the book to COAB members are in the room. So we are having a conversation around them and about them, but not with them, to add further clarity to what it is we're talking about here. And with that said, I'm recalling our discussion at the executive committee, where I was also present on the phone. And I believe the question I raised was, well, could we as individual COAB members purchase the book from those who wish to gift the book? Bud, am I correct? Is my recollection? Help me? Okay, thank you, Sharon. Since that meeting, I have been thinking about, and as our discussion is taking place here, and as I'm trying not to have an anxiety attack, how can we make something happen that, to the good, that is about sharing, receiving information that people who have been working on these issues for years, revered members of the community, how can we make something happen tonight without putting it off to the next executive committee meeting and just belaboring something that shouldn't be so complicated? I, for one, am willing to borrow the book from those who wish to gift the book. And so I am, for the record, borrowing the book. So that's what I want to say. And I hope that we can come to some resolution that honors those who wish to give the book, and that also honors who they are in our community. People who have labored long on these issues.
Sharon.
Thank you for that. That's very helpful as well. A lot is about context, and I don't have that background. I would suggest as a solution to the issue, potentially, and it also does not seem equitable if someone happens to be able to afford a $50 book and can go buy it, but certain people can't afford it but want it. That's an issue as well. But I would suggest that what Senator Gordley suggested be a way around the issues, that if there are individuals who borrow the book from other individuals and others on the COAB are interested in borrowing it, then I personally don't see how that is a problem. We don't have to borrow it if we don't want to. It's not being given to us. It goes back to the owner, just from a technical standpoint. And then we can get past this, because I think this is a small.
Yeah, I've got two people over here, Philip, and then Jackery, and then Rabbi Kahana.
Okay, so in response to Dr. Sharon, as a follow-up comment, so first, for Senator Gordley, I agree with you. I think it is important to recognize the community members. They meant well, and they are important members as part of our, working towards our goal here. Is we want to support that, and I recognize that, and I really appreciate that gift, the idea of a gift. And Sharon, if we as COAB members, during the meeting, if we borrow a book, then we have to go through that documentation process. And does it get complicated or become an issue, or what? If those community members go home as a personal individual without, if individuals from the COAB go to their home and borrow the book, then what is that perceived as? Is that kind of a coercion? Is that an issue of perception? And I think I hit all the points there, but just going back to, I don't know, that idea of the perception is the main issue.
I have to turn down a lot of things during my job, and if someone gives me something, then I'll pay for it. I think that when you try to do things like borrow, and you kind of start getting in gray area, and it's like or college athletes that are trying to get recruited to teams, and you're going to borrow some executive's Ferrari. Well, you're borrowing, it's not yours. I think when you start doing these kind of things, it looks corrupt, in my opinion. And I think that the city attorney said what the rules were, and I think we just kind of didn't like the answer, and so we're trying to work our way around it. That's just my opinion. I think we do that a lot and waste a lot of time in the meetings.
Thank you. I just want to say I appreciate the ethical conversation. I kind of live in that world, and it's very helpful. This presentation was helpful. I only just want to comment, it feels like these presentations have been reactive rather than proactive. So they're responding to particular issues that have occurred. I think this is very helpful. I hadn't actually thought of myself as a public official until your presentation, so this is very helpful for my thinking. I'm actually far more concerned in reality on this particular issue of the concept of coercion, to put it in a term, the idea that some group, and I don't actually know who we're talking about, but individuals or groups might want us to read a particular book from a particular vantage point. I happen to have read that book, and I found it extremely helpful, and I think it was quite broad, and didn't feel like it was promoting a particular agenda, and I'm glad that I read it. I borrowed it. I would like to ask, as a matter of policy, because I think these are two very different issues. Because this has to do with information that will help us in our work. I'd like to ask that a committee, and I suspect it's the Communications Committee, put together a bibliography for us. There must be any number of resources that are out there that would be very helpful in our work and our thinking about it, because this is new to me and I'm learning a great deal, and I'd like to learn more. But I would appreciate someone doing some research to ensure that we're getting an unbiased bibliography. Or if it's biased, then we know it.
Yeah.
That's okay.
I want to weigh in on this and just give you my view. Oh, it's me. Given what we're doing and the importance of what we're doing, is it worth risking the question of our integrity to try to edge around something that we could make very clear and go forward, find another way to handle? And that's with all due respect, because I talked to the people that made the gift and begged them not to leave us, because they're important, and they have written responses, they've gone into the COCO, they're important. They're critical. We need people who will do that. At the same time, we have to stay extremely clean and credible. We are being watched. And there'll be people who want to poke holes in us, whether we deserve them or not. So that's the question I'm raising here. If there's a summary or any more important questions, yes?
To be specific, I think a bibliography and having books available at the public library, any of the books that are on that bibliography, would ensure that we're not being unduly influenced, and I think avoids the issue of gifting.
Right.
So appreciate the generosity, but for all the reasons that have been expressed, I would agree that it would be inappropriate to have these gifts, but I think information that it's only helpful for us to have more knowledge.
Okay, one of the things, okay, anything else? I want to close this out at this point in time, and thank you very much, Judy, for coming and helping us out, giving us information. I want to notice that your observation about this being reactive is real. We are behind the curve on some things, and some things will be reactive because they'll happen because they didn't happen before now. And so we're going to try to get to the place where we're more proactive in our exploration of our duties, obligations, and boundaries under which we work. We are going to try from here out to have public comment as time certain being between 6:15 and 6:30-ish, and I think we're a little bit over it now, 6:38. So I'm opening up the microphones for public comment. Were there any names on the sign-up sheet? Okay. It's okay. You can probably get signed up. We're asking you to limit your comments to 3 minutes. I know it doesn't sound like a long time, but a part of that is in order to try to get people, as many people as possible, to speak. And we're going to start out with Dan Handelman.
Good evening. I'm Dan Handelman with Portland Cop Watch. And I'm going to say two words I haven't really heard this evening yet. Settlement agreement. Okay. Next, I'm going to say that, we appreciate that DOJ came to town to investigate excessive force in our community. We know that Portland police have been called out and noted that there is sometimes excessive force being used, but there have been 5 shootings already this year, and we're only into the beginning of the 7th month. There were only 4 shootings in all of last year. So the DOJ's presence is not reducing the number of police shootings, and I don't know how we're going to fix that. But just to be clear again about something that's already been raised here tonight, this isn't about improving community police relations. This is about changing the institution of the police and fixing the problems that were discovered in the DOJ's investigation. So yes, a byproduct of that will be trust and community police relations, but I think the institutional change is what we were looking for. It's hard to have the public comment before the bulk of your meeting. I know you're about to get a presentation about the Independent Police Review Division. I'm not going to try to anticipate exactly what the director is going to say, but our group, Portland Cop Watch, has been following this issue since we got started. The oversight system here, as you know, in the DOJ's assessment is Byzantine, and it's very complicated and confusing to explain to people who are part of it. We're hoping for a more integrated system in the future, meaning that somebody who files a complaint files it one place, it goes and gets heard by one set of people, whether or not the police officers were in policy or not, and then the outcome can be appealed to the same body no matter what kind of complaint it is. Right now, if there's a shooting, you cannot appeal that finding to the Police Review Board, and unfortunately that's written in the settlement agreement. I'm hoping we can ignore that part of the settlement agreement and change that. The Citizen Review Committee, which is part of the IPR, they hear the appeals of misconduct cases, just 2 weeks ago got the power for the first time to order the Internal Affairs or the IPR to do more investigation in a case where they feel that the investigation was not good enough. This is a tremendous step forward for our city. Our volunteer citizen board now has the power to order the city to do something. They've never had a power like that before. The Police Review Board, which is internal to the Bureau and does the shootings and deaths, is supposed to have that power written down, but they don't, and nobody is taking responsibility to change that code. So I'm hoping that this body and the COCL make sure that somebody takes the responsibility to rewrite the code, even though the Police Review Board recently sent a case back for more investigation, but it's not written down that it's their power to do that. And I think in terms of this discussion, these discussions you've been having about all the little pitfalls you're finding along the way, somebody needs to document this so that when another city has this happen, that they know to do these things up front so they don't have the same problems that we had here in Portland. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. Lavon Heister.
I'm a little shorter here. Hi, I'm Lavon Heister. I'm the chair of the Portland Commission on Disability, and I had an invitation to make to everyone in the room, which may seem a little bizarre to you, but I'll explain why it makes sense to me. We're having an Americans with Disability Act celebration for the 25th anniversary on July 26th at ERCO. And Amy can get a hold of the information, or Commissioner Wolf, who is representing the Portland Commission on Disability, can get you that information. But the reason I'm sharing this with you is because one of the people who is working, it's all about sharing our history and dreaming our future. And one of the people who's sharing her story, it's all about storytelling, is someone who is experiencing intersectionality of race and post-traumatic stress disorder, which is part of what has brought you here today, is people who have those experiences. So I wanted to make sure that you got an invitation to come out. It's at ERCO, which is 103rd and Northeast Gleason. The other thing, in just listening to the conversation about the book, I'm not going to try and extend it much farther. I just want to say, as far as any bibliographies or books, it would also be nice as the alternate for for the commission. I would like to know if those things are available in large print or are available through screen readers or somehow accessible, because for me, I can't read a standard book. So just a piece of information. Thank you.
Thank you. Ella Howard.
Hello. First of all, thanks for being here. I really appreciate you being here as the board, and I appreciate opening remarks about building trust and telling stories. My name is Ella Howard, and I worked for 12 years for Project Respond. That's the mental health crisis response team who goes out with the police to respond to mental health crisis. And I was hired for a cultural diversity team that was started in 2002 after lots of social activism in town. I just wanted to appreciate you being here and just say that the issues are complex. I really appreciated my job. Some people were telling me that this has to be the most challenging job on the planet. I actually really felt honored and felt happy to be able to meet every single client and had lots of good experiences with the police. And the issue is very complex and it requires constant work. And I'm working myself right now on trying to find a way to creatively express myself on the issue. So for now, I just wanted to say thank you for being here and encourage you to keep going.
Thank you. Nancy Newell.
This is an unusual time for me. I don't know if anybody remembers Enron Corporation in this city. And I hear some of the wording from the city attorney about ethics and about the conduct of our city. I mean, we have a serious police problem. With Enron, we wanted an image to be an internationally owned by an international corporation. And what happened? We put the name on one of our soccer buildings. We put the name on so many different locations. We were so proud. I wasn't proud. I fought the merger down at the Public Utility Commission because I knew what they would do. And they killed people in California when they cut off electricity in a heat wave. That is, how can I have trust in a city attorney? How did COAB allow that the only legal opinion in this room? I really take that as an umbrance to citizen activism that is so meaningful in this community, and people work hours and long days and stand up in ridicule to try to have it changed. So I really highly recommend that this group consider other legal advice. The city attorney, the city's appealing this whole process. They don't even honor the process. They don't withdraw their appeal. We've asked them, we're circulating petitions. What's the problem here? We are working things out. This group is coming together to get things done. And it seems to me we really need a different symbol than the city attorney telling us how things are supposed to work on this committee. It really is a strange situation as far as I'm concerned. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, let's take about a 15-minute break, please. So the first thing I want to do is extend our thank yous to Rabbi Kahana for providing us with this space today. So did you have anything you wanted to say?
Oh, sure, just welcome. It's lovely to have everyone here, and this was purely selfish on my part. I wanted the air conditioning too. But Congregation Beth Israel is happy to welcome you. I did note that some people were not aware that we have a parking lot. There is a lot on the corner. There is also parking underneath this building, so for anybody, when you come in, if you pull on the right-hand side, the gate opens automatically when it's unlocked. So if you have difficulty parking on the street. Now that I'm a city official, I want to object publicly to the parking meters that are going to be put up. So who knew I had such power? This is great. Lastly, I did want to say that anybody who would like to stay around afterwards, be happy to give a tour of our historic sanctuary across the street.
Thank you. Next on our agenda, Constantine Severe, who is going to talk to us about the IPR. Thank you. Introduce yourself, please.
Hello, my name is Constantine Severe. I am the director of the City Auditor's Independent Police Review. We are a small office of 12 folks. We have a role as the City of Portland's oversight of the Portland Police Bureau. So I've brought a PowerPoint that's a very kind of quick hit on the oversight system. This is meant as kind of an overview and a kind of conversation starter. I'm available to the COAB and COCL members for kind of more in depth for work groups, whatever, even community members. There's information about IPR at the desk out front, some of our prior reports. We hire consultants to review all officer-involved shootings. There's a couple of reports out front as well. And we recently did a review on how the Portland Police Bureau engages with the local hip-hop community, and that report is outside as well. So if we can go to the next slide, is a pretty brief intro into how a complaint starts with someone expressing displeasure with an interaction with a Portland police officer. Our system under the Department of Justice Settlement Agreement is supposed to take 180 days to do a misconduct investigation. So that comes from whenever we receive the complaint to when the chief has his proposed finding. Intake, that's something that is delegated to IPR. That takes about 14 days. An investigation, if it goes to that stage, takes about 60 days. So IPR's role during that 14-day intake period is for us to contact a community member, any of their witnesses, do research in the computer. I'm trying to not use jargon, but CAD, which is a dispatching system, and talk to different civilian witnesses, businesses, get video, basically kind of do a rough outline of the case in the 14 days to make a determination of whether this case will be further investigated. After that's done, we have a decision to make of whether the case will be dismissed, whether there'll be mediation, whether it'll be subject to full investigation, or will be a service improvement opportunity, which is a category of case handling reserved for cases that are minor non-disciplinary complaints, usually something like, I think the officer was rude to me, or I requested some service and I felt like the officer had a tone. And basically that's it. So worst case scenario, if let's say we did a full investigation, the officer would not face discipline. And in the city of Portland, discipline is considered a letter of reprimand or hire. And hire is days off without pay. So if you look in the middle of the PowerPoint, that's kind of assuming this case is going to investigation. After investigation, it goes to the commander's findings stage. That takes about 14 days, and that we have every step in our process lined out, and everybody has allocated timelines. Next slide, please. The next stage is the Police Review Board, which is an advisory board that makes recommendations to the Chief of Police. It has 5 voting members, and it has about 30 days to do its work. There is basically one hearing that happens, but officers need to receive at least 2 weeks' notice before a board, and there's also kind of administrative timeline or administrative time that's kind of encapsulated within that 30 days. After the Police Review Board, a case could theoretically go to the Citizen Review Committee, which is an organization that is part of the Auditor's Office. It's there are 11 volunteer members. They have a lot of different roles, but their, I think, most important role is hearing appeals of community member appeals of misconduct cases. Officers can also appeal as well. The next step would be the decision that the chief made, whether the officer, the allegation against the officer was sustained or not sustained, exonerated, or there's all these different iterations. I'll try to keep it very simple. In our system of government in Portland, we have a commissioner form of government. So the police commissioner, the mayor, is the final say in all cases. So all the other steps are recommendations to the ultimate fact finder, which is the chief of police usually, but in the most serious cases, the mayor. Next slide, please. Yes, please. Just to, so I can just kind of get the information out, and so everybody kind of starts off at least on the same plane of when they ask their questions. So IPR's mission, we take complaints and commendations. We had last year about 379 complaints. Commendations, we had about 400 commendations. We have the ability to do our own administrative investigations. We can conduct policy reviews, make recommendations directly to the police bureau. We act as a monitor in officer-involved shootings, in-custody deaths. So that means we go out to the scene when there is an officer-involved shooting, in-custody death. That is a relatively new power that our office has. That is since 2010. There are 3 folks in the management level at IPR, and we take turns being on call. So for the month of June, I was on call. There were 2 officer-involved shootings. I responded to the scene. I was there usually for between 2 to 3 hours. I stick around until at least the officers receive their notice of when they will be expected to provide an administrative interview. There is usually a briefing at the scene of an officer-involved shooting, and then there is a briefing that is called the chief's briefing that happens the day after an officer-involved shooting. Our office is part of that. We are able to participate in officer and witness interviews if we choose to do so. And as with all cases, we must approve the investigation done by Internal Affairs and approve the finding done by the involved officer's commander. And in just kind of regular misconduct cases, we help facilitate CRC appeals. Next slide, please. So a little bit of background about IPR. We were created in 2001. We are part of the City Auditor's Office. So as you know, Portland Commissioner form of government, there are 5 commissioners. The auditor is the 6th elected. But does not sit at the dais with the council members, but has the ability to forward legislation to city council, which the auditor's office has used in 2010 and 2013 when there were some significant changes made to the functioning of IPR and CRC. Our office has subpoena power, so we're able to gather documents and request civilians talk to us. That's another thing that we got the ability to do in 2010. So under city code, so I just discussed subpoena power. So for officers, we do not subpoena them. They are city employees. As kind of part of the employer-employee disciplinary system that IPR is part of, employees can be compelled to talk to their employer. Officers do not work for IPR. They work for the Portland Police Bureau. So we use Internal Affairs as the liaison, and officers are compelled to sit for an interview and answer honestly and truthfully under penalty of dismissal if they do not cooperate with our investigation. So per city code, I discussed this a little bit earlier, but we review and approve all investigations, and we review and either concur with the findings done by the officer's commander, or we refer it to the police review board. We're also a voting member on the police review board. Next slide. So IPR staff, there are 5 investigators, 1 outreach coordinator, 2 administrative support staff, a management analyst, 2 assistant directors, and myself, the director. Next slide. So how do we take a complaint? We take all complaints. In some jurisdictions, you have to write basically a written affidavit. In Portland, that does not exist. If somebody comes in and says, I have an allegation against this particular officer, I have this concern, we take that complaint. We take complaints in a variety of methods. We've gotten basically postcards with no postage stamp on them before, and initiated an investigation based on that in prior circumstances. We provide interpretive services. On staff, we have Spanish, Vietnamese, and Chinese, Slavic, and Haitian Creole availability. We contract out for other languages. Expectation is IPR will contact all community members who want to file a complaint with us. And we'll go out and meet with folks in the community. So sometimes we'll go out to, we've been out to our Right to Dream 2, Join, ERCO, basically have an investigator set up shop in that particular organization for the day for a shift and sit there, and if somebody wants to file a complaint or, you know, tell us something about the police bureau that they think the police bureau is doing well. Next slide. So 2014 case statistics. We had 379 complaints last year. We dismissed 75% of our cases. 20% were referred to Internal Affairs. The most common reason for our dismissal is the officer does not work for the, there's a series of common reasons why we dismiss a case, but part of that is officer doesn't work for the city of Portland. As you folks know, if you ever in downtown and you see a police officer, a lot of times they're not Portland police officer. They might work for Multnomah County, they might work for Tigard, particularly around, particularly if they're working for the transit division. The complainant is unavailable. Basically, the complainant hasn't followed through with their complaint. There's a filing delay. So under code, if for minor issues, there's a 60-day delay. For major issues, there's a 6-month delay allowed. In working practice, for use of force complaints, usually if it's done within a year or so, we allow that to proceed. If somebody is in custody, if somebody was hospitalized, if they have some good reason for why they didn't file a complaint, we will take that complaint irrespective of how late it was. But that does have a consequence of trying to document the issue, because the longer it takes for someone to contact our office, the less likelihood that we have evidence. TriMet gets rid of their videos within 48 hours. A lot of video that's at fast food places, it cycles through within a week, couple of weeks. So we have less to work with. And the biggest area is that the complainant does not allege misconduct by an officer. So an example of that is, I was driving on McLaughlin. I was driving 55 in a 45. There are 4 other people driving the same speed as me. I was the one who was stopped. And that is the complaint. Was the officer rude to you? No. Do you believe that there was a racial motivation for the officer stopping you? No. With that, under our code, there's really nothing else for us to do but to dismiss that particular type of complaint. But we will refer a lot of the cases that we do dismiss to the precinct commander for the review. particularly if it's more of a policy issue. One of the things with the way our system was set up initially was that it was looking at individual officers and misconduct issues. When we're looking at policy issues, we either use kind of the policy review mechanism or we refer the issue to the officer's commander. Our most common complaints is basically quality of service issues. Officers being rude, officers engaging in inadequate action or assistance. My background is I'm a former criminal defense attorney, and one of the complaints that really surprised me when I first started at the city is somebody calls the police shows up, talks to, Mr. Meyer, Ms. Smith, says, I want Mr. Meyer arrested. And the officer says, based on what I've heard, there's not really enough evidence for me to arrest this person. Maybe a day later, that person calls IPR, says, I wanted Mr. Meyer arrested. And frankly, that was one that really surprised me, and that's a significant kind of complaint area. Inadequate, improper investigation, use of force, demeaning conduct. Use of force complaints, post the Department of Justice settlement agreement, those complaints are always investigated unless there is clear and convincing evidence to IPR that the allegation has no basis in fact. So clear and convincing evidence for any of you who've ever been an attorney or watched Matlock, that is a very high standard. And IPR is basically the kind of arbiter of whether there's no basis in fact. And so in my kind of instruction to my investigators and to my staff has been that if there is a use of force complaint, there has to be a very good reason for us to dismiss it, and I haven't really heard a good reason for us to dismiss a use of force complaint post the Department of Justice settlement agreement. Next slide. Created in 2001, so the Citizen Review Committee created the same time as IPR, 11 members. They're appointed to 3-year terms. There are no term limits. They hear appeals of investigative misconduct cases. They have access to the full investigative file, which different jurisdictions around the country do it differently. Some jurisdictions, they have summaries or, they'll kind of be able to kind of take a peek at files. But in Portland, the practice is, and now it's enshrined in our procedures, is that the CRC members are expected to be able to access the full file. And additionally, they're able to, as Mr. Handelman made the point earlier, they're able to request additional investigation to IPR or IA, and we do not have the discretion to say no if it is their first request. The CRC makes its recommendations to the auditor, counsel, and the police chief, even though they're part of the auditor's office. Next slide, please. The Police Review Board, they're created in 2010. It took the place of something that was called the Performance Review Board and Use of Force Review Boards. As I said, it acts as an advisory board to the chief of police. It reviews a number of cases, but all officer-involved shootings in custody deaths. So in Portland, every officer-involved shooting in custody death is subject to a criminal investigation and an administrative investigation. Once that process is done, it goes to the Police Review Board for a finding by the PRB of whether the officer was in policy or outside of policy. The PRB also hears all use of force cases where there's an injury that requires hospitalization. And in just kind of general misconduct cases, when there is an involved officer who's facing 1 day or more of suspension without pay, or if either the assistant chief who's reviewing the case, the officer's commander, internal affairs, or IPR, either one of those entities I just said, refer the case to the PRB. 5 voting members. In force cases, there are 7 voting members. And just really quickly, the voting members are the involved officer's commander, the assistant chief in charge of that branch, peer officer member, a community member, and IPR. So for the force cases, you add a peer member and you add a community member. And post Department of Justice settlement agreement, CRC members act as a voting member on the PRB in force cases on a rotating basis. The board is facilitated by someone who is not employed by the Portland Police Bureau or the city. They're outside facilitators. And one of the most important things about the PRB is that there are public reports twice a year, usually January and July, that kind of discuss the cases that the PRB has heard in that interim period. Next slide, please. Department of Justice settlement agreement. So you guys have had the kind of the full Jonas Geisler production of the DOJ agreement. So this is the narrow version of that, the stuff that affects IPR and the CRC in kind of on a regular basis. So Section 8 is the officer accountability section. It is the smallest section of the DOJ agreement, but it is one that has significant consequence for the city and in basically our future as a city. Paragraph 121, 180 days to complete administrative investigation. I kind of explained that earlier. The CRC has 21 days to conduct an appeal. That's a significant shortening from the prior process. Particularly for the CRC, 21 days to conduct an appeal. They are community members like the COAB folks. That is something very difficult to ask of community members, but the CRC members have had a really good attitude about kind of accommodating themselves to this agreement that the city has reached with the Department of Justice. IPR has ability to conduct independent investigations. Well, the city has to enable IPR to be able to actually do independent investigations, and we have to reduce redundant IPR and internal affairs interviews. So IPR, but prior to 2013, had never conducted an independent investigation. So IPR, if you remember, created in 2001. Right now we have 12 investigators. We have 12 staff members, 5 investigators. Prior to 2013, prior to the Department of Justice settlement agreement, we had 2.5 investigators and averaging around 450 complaints. So it wasn't realistic for our office to be able to conduct any type of investigation with the resources that we had. The agreement allowed us to have additional resources. Since the agreement, we've conducted about 15 independent investigations. I see us increasing the amount of independent investigations that we do. One of the things that I think the Department of Justice, to their credit, has kind of had a discussion with folks at the city about is looking at complaint categories that IPR takes a look at and what we will be doing investigations on. Paragraph 129, use of force cases, basically mandatory investigation unless there is no basis in fact for the allegation. Paragraph 136, CRC make their additional request. And paragraph 137, the discipline guide. That is very important. The ability for fact finders in our administrative investigation process, when they're making discipline decisions, to have a consistent and objective basis for why they're imposing discipline, so that having a good investigation process is very important. And it took the city a number of years to have a credible investigation process. Having a fact-finding process that is credible is important, but all that really doesn't mean anything if the case gets arbitrated and it gets thrown out by an arbitrator. And one of the consistent reasons why arbitrators have thrown out prior city disciplinary decisions is that they have said that the city has tried to create new law or new rules for officers based on a particular case, that there was no notice given to the officer, and that the disciplinary decision was arbitrary. The discipline guideline is a tool. It's something that fact finders take into consideration, and it provides basically a safety net of infrastructure for disciplinary decisions at the city. We've had a discipline guideline since March of 2014, and as somebody who's been working with the city for about 6 years, I think it's been one of the biggest changes in our oversight system. And so that's the end of my PowerPoint, I believe. And so I wanted to open it up for questions if anybody had questions. I am surprised, shocked.
Let's
Ms.
start with,
Maxwell, you have been
Philip.
so patient. Thank you so much for bearing with me.
Philip?
Oh.
Okay. So thank you for that presentation. I have 3 questions that I jotted down, real quick questions here. The first one that I've got is, when an investigation is concluded and a report is filed, what do you do with that report? And how long does it sit there until it's thrown away? What does that process look like? My second question then is, if an officer's misconduct is found, how or in what kind of how do you change that offer? What's provided to the officer? What does that look like to change there? What is the protocol? And is there a protocol for how you approach that situation if misconduct is found? And if an officer is involved in a shooting, what is done with the officer? What's the protocol there? Are they put into counseling? Are they automatically sent home during the investigation? I'm just kind of looking for a little bit more clarity on that.
Oh, was there another one?
Oh, no, that was 3.
Okay. That's why I'm an attorney. I'm not an accountant.
Yeah, we can go around.
So, generally, once an investigative report is done, it is forwarded to the officer's commander for them to make a fact-finding decision, which we call our fact-finding memo. And the commander has 14 days to do that. And so the other question on officer-involved shootings, the practice now is when there is an officer-involved shooting for the officers to be placed on administrative leave. It is not a part of the disciplinary process, but it is something that the Police Bureau has decided to do with officers put in that context. I know there is EAP services provided to officers. There's also a debriefing provided to officers after officer-involved shooting. But as someone who's outside the Police Bureau, I don't really know much beyond that.
Okay, can you go back to number 1? So again, if the report is done, I'm just wondering what happens. Is it filed? How long is it kept? Is it thrown away? What do you do with that report after it's done?
So yeah, so us being a government agency, we don't throw away anything. So the officer. That's a start. So just generally with most of the cases, the Internal Affairs Division of the Portland Police Bureau does investigative report. It forwards that to the officer's commander. The commander makes a decision. Ultimately, the chief makes the final call of whether the officer is going to be sustained or not sustained, or whether he's exonerated. Let's say if an officer is sustained, I'll just keep it simple. The officer is sustained, and there is some sort of follow-up where either a letter of reprimand or days off. There is basically a discipline coordinator at the Portland Police Bureau that keeps track of that. Because the question that you ask of, do they throw it away? I don't think the Police Bureau has ever thrown anything away, but particularly on cases that had gone to the Police Review Board in the past, and particularly the Performance Review Board, there have been previous audits done by the Audit Services Division of the Auditor's Office of the Police Bureau not doing a good job of kind of tracking recommendations that came out of the Performance Review Board on, individual officer issues and policy issues that were more systemic. So now there is someone at the Police Bureau, the Police Review Board coordinator, who keeps track of all the recommendations that have come out of the PRB, which I think at this point is over 300. And there's basically kind of a tracking list that's digitized and that person kind of maintains and follows up on. Yes, ma'am.
DOJ investigation. Apparently, it was said by the DOJ that the Portland system of accountability is Byzantine. That word was used, and that word is repeated over and over and over again by members of the community when they talk about the system. So, can you tell us what about this system is Byzantine, and what is being done to change that, to un-Byzantine it?
Un-Byzantine, I'll avoid the easy joke of Byzantium and Constantine, but anyways. Anyway, because it's kind of funny because I saw that in the Department of Justice agreement, but it was like, my name's Constantine. That's a bad thing, I guess. Okay, anyways. So the thing about our system, so there's two ways of doing oversight. There is the pure police agency doing, like having a kind of a traditional internal affairs shop, having the bureau or police department command structure making the disciplinary decisions and not having civilians involved. Or you can go to the model that they have in, let's say, San Francisco or Washington, D.C., where it is 90-something% civilian, where civilians take the complaints, they do the investigations, they either have civilian boards or they do a fact-finding process, and then maybe the review board makes the decision or the police commission makes the decision with the chief of the agency making the final call. In Portland, we combined both of those systems into one. That is the complexity. So if you go back in time 15 years ago, the city of Portland had a very simple disciplinary system. There was internal affairs that did the investigation. It would be routed through the Portland Police Bureau. It would go to the review level committee, which was 3 assistant chiefs and the captain of internal affairs, and they made the decision. So that was oversight. That was the process. So one of the things I think our partners in the Department of Justice, when they wrote that, and one of the consequences of like saying it's Byzantine is the complexity is the civilian part. So when I hear people in the community say, well, we want to make it simple, you can definitely do that. And I don't, I work for the city. I don't really have a say in how that system works. When you look at other jurisdictions, they've made the choice of saying, okay, you know what, we want to have an office of civilian complaints like they have in San Francisco and, do 20 years of litigation with their police union to get that done, which is what happened in San Francisco. Or you can just give it back to the Portland Police Bureau for them to kind of make that decision. That said, I think some of the ways that, it's really a matter of streamlining some of the administrative processes that kind of got built up over time, and also just opening up the process so people, and particularly officers as well, understand what the system is. Because I've talked to a lot of officers in my time at the city, and they don't have a really good sense of what this process is. Because, just in the general year, we get 379 complaints, roughly. That involves about, 150 officers. If you think there's about 1,000 sworn officers, most officers on a yearly basis don't receive complaints. So from kind of the community perspective of making sure our system is accountable, the biggest part of that, I think, is just opening it up and making it much more transparent than it is. And I think we've made some steps. I think there's some other steps that we can do to make it further transparent.
Okay, I'm going to move on, and I thought I saw some hands over here. All right, Sharon, then Bud, and then I have a question from one of our members on the phone that I'll read. So, Sharon?
Okay. So I have several questions. In regards to the sheet here, where is the mayor is listed, but the police commissioner, where does the police commissioner get notified, even though that is the mayor? And how does that, can that be reflected in your diagram?
So are you talking about officer-involved shootings?
The misconduct, on both sides. I don't see the police commissioner.
So for officer-involved shootings, when there's an officer-involved shooting, the mayor and the mayor's office are notified. There's kind of a protocol that's listed in Portland Police Bureau directives of people who need to be notified when there's an officer-involved shooting. The mayor is part of that protocol list. On misconduct investigations, before any case goes, is closed, the mayor's office reviews that investigation to make sure that they don't have any issues. And also at the police review board, the mayor's office has a seat as an advisory member, so they attend every police review board.
Okay. As far as the tracking, you said which of the groups was, only came on like 2010, or was that something specific?
So the Police Review Board started in 2010. It was just basically kind of a reformulation of a prior board.
Okay, and then in tracking, as you're tracking these complaints, and it said 379, do you forward any of that information to the training department for review, or to do that? It's an alert based on the complaints that are being filed, so that there's some form of refresher course, or it goes to the commanders so that they are addressing that in morning roll calls?
Right. So yeah, so in a couple of ways. So in like officer-involved shootings in custody death, part of that, there's the criminal investigation, the administrative investigation. There's also a training analysis that is done by the training division. So for every officer-involved shooting, and as well as other type of critical incidents, there's a training analysis. So there is that piece for the major cases. So, on the general misconduct cases, if there is something that is kind of not just individual officer or even an individual shift, we'll notify the precinct commander about the issue. If it's a big enough issue, we'll notify the chief directly, or our liaison at the police bureau, which is the captain professional standards division, and they'll disseminate that message out further into the bureau.
And then one last question: how does the public find out about how to file a complaint? How many times do you do outreach to the community at large, and to make sure that people know how, residents know how to file a complaint, and, the process?
That is a great question, and I was going to be negligent in my duties, because one of the things that our outreach coordinator wanted me to do today was talk about our upcoming information and community engagement session, which is going to be July 29th at the Q Center on North Mississippi. The address is 4115 North Mississippi. I know it's in between Skidmore and Shaver, roughly. So between us and the CRC, we go out and have kind of community engagement sessions at least 5 to 6 times a year, just kind of broader community engagement sessions. And we try to meet, at IPR, we try to meet with different stakeholder organizations, from ERCO. Yesterday I met with the folks at Apano. Basically, the biggest part of our job, really, outside of the misconduct investigation, is outreach. So we talk to a lot of organizations, Irene tables, basically any type of city function or community function, say hey, whatever, usually there's at least 2 or 3 IPR people there trying to, pass our cards, let people know. We're actually going to try an advertising campaign of just letting the broader community know about what our services are. Yes.
Okay, great. And so maybe I can give you a suggestion. There were probably over like 2,000 people or families at the movies at the parks last night at Peninsula. And it was just, the whole park, just where the baseball diamonds were just completely packed. Those are opportunities to reach people, the, regular everyday people, because I'm just wondering, most people don't know that they can file a complaint, and if they do, a lot of people do feel intimidated by that. So those are opportunities to, have a tabling to where you can capture a large audience too.
Right. You're absolutely right. So the last year we've tried to focus on basically kind of 3 areas: youth, the homeless population, and kind of emerging immigrant communities. So last year we went to basically every major high school within kind of the city limits and kind of put on presentations for the young folks, and also try to get feedback from them. And some of their feedback will be incorporated in our further outreach efforts, where some of the points that you raised, like, we have never heard of you. Some of the young folks thought that, they would have to pay us something to file a complaint, or they thought we were police officers, and for some communities that was a barrier. So of kind of explain what we do and, that we are part of the auditor's office is something that we've kind of learned through our outreach activities. And then on the other hand, of talking to some of the immigrant communities where they, a lot of their issues were, we want more police services. So it was kind of interesting hearing from kind of different segments of our community that traditionally we haven't done a great job of engaging with. And one of the things, while I'm here, I can try to pitch. I know the CRC chair, Mae Wilson, has been before the COAB a couple of times of encouraging COAB members to go to CRC meetings. I would further encourage that. There are a lot of city stakeholder type groups out there. The CRC has been around for 14 years. They're one of the oldest kind of city stakeholder groups still in existence. And I think they need your feedback, and I think you guys need some of their feedback as well, given that the CRC is a part of the settlement agreement between the DOJ and the city.
Okay, we're going to listen to Bud, and then I'm going to read this, and we have another big chunk of work to be done this evening.
Thank you. Constantine, you described how things were done in terms of accountability prior to IPR. And so my question, and this is a series of just 2 or 3 questions, but my first question is, why do we have IPR? In other words, what is supposed to improve by our having IPR versus when we didn't have IPR? What are we supposed to get out of it as a people?
Oh, okay. So, basically IPR's value added is that we will engage in kind of regular daily oversight of the Police Bureau of making sure that if we see a case that we do not agree with, that we can refer that to the Police Review Board. And the other part of it is of having community members be able to access city services in the field of police oversight or filing a complaint that was more accessible than the traditional method of having to go to a police precinct, where some people are quite willing to do that even now. That's where we get some of our complaints. But there are some folks who don't feel very comfortable reaching out to city agencies, much less a police agency. And I think one of the biggest value addeds that IPR adds is that we have 5 investigators who are our main contact points with community members, and they are significant amount of cultural competency training, significant experience as investigators. And I think the work product that our office has turned out over the years, particularly taking the complaints that we get in, looking at it from a systemic issue or a systemic posture, and then making recommendations directly to council saying, hey, you know what? The performance review board process that you have right now, where you have the chief appointing community members to serve on this board, that really should be a council function. That was something that IPR was able to take the lead on, and I think because we saw cases on a daily basis and we get to know the cases very well, I think we had a credibility with council and with folks in the community that we were able to partner with, and even folks in the police bureau. And I think that's part of our role of sometimes acting as a bridge between the community and the police bureau. There are times where folks at the police bureau have issues and they let us know about it, and we're able to make recommendations, take action, do an investigation, or do a policy review.
So if I can paraphrase your answer, it sounds like as a process owner, you're acting to make sure that the process of review is accessible, reliable, and predictable. Is that a fair statement?
And much briefer than what I said. Yes.
Okay.
That is much better than what I said.
So if that's true, how do we measure that? How do we know if that's working?
I think, what's the metric for success is something that's bedeviled civilian oversight traditionally, because back in 2010, I was in front of city council asking for all this authority and thought I was doing pretty decent for myself. And then Sam Adams asked me, how do you measure success? And I didn't have an answer, so I didn't feel that good about myself. In the 5 years since then, I've actually thought about that. One of the metrics of how we measure success is where when you have regular community members feel comfortable and knowledgeable about our office to file a complaint if they want to, or engage in a commendation process. I think our sites for oversight in the city of Portland has been relatively low, where it's basically a reactive thing, where it's like, okay, we want to get this bad officer, which is important. But from what I've seen, when you're able to engage in oversight on kind of like, with a lot of kind of forethought and kind of doing it on a regular basis, and you get to know the cases and you get to know the police bureau and what the community's issues are, you're able to be in a more proactive stance. And I guess one of the measures is, people being able to file complaints with us and actually know that we exist. The other measure is for us to actually be able to, so if you look at IPR's original code, there's a number of things that IPR is able to do. IPR is able to do independent investigations. So until 2013, we had never done zero. That's a big failure. That's a systemic failure at the city of not having a mechanism to allow that to happen. So for us, one of my big measures of success is for us to be able to do an independent investigation, and it's not a big kind of cataclysmic event, which it was for a good chunk of 2014. You might have read some of the stuff in the newspaper about that. For us to be able to engage in oversight where it's not seen from an officer perspective that, why is IPR doing this investigation? Are they out to get me? Where it's, IPR is doing its job and it's kind of a normal fact of life. And there are, category of cases that we are engaging in oversight in. And particularly, what you had to say about predictability, I think that's important for community members, and I think it's important for officers. So if IPR is doing an investigation, that community members know, okay, if this involves, let's say, a protest case, disparate treatment case, IPR is going to do that case as an independent investigation. Don't have to worry about kind of the screening intake process. IPR is going to do the full investigation. Officers understand that IPR is going to do that investigation, and it's not that IPR is out to get the officer. In our investigations, we don't have recommendations. Yes, ma'am.
The questions.
Yes. So, Bud, your questions are so great, and so basically, I'm gonna have to talk to you afterwards, because this is really what I've been thinking about for the last couple of years of just trying to make some concrete changes with our oversight system. And I think, one, just making it much more predictable and making it reliable, and that we're able to do our oversight function without, several people in my office working 60, 70-hour weeks.
Thank you, Constantine. Kathleen, I'll cede the floor.
Huh? Okay. All right. Then I'm going to read the question from V, except it's now disappeared off this little thing. All right. There are two questions. The first is, if there is a shooting by an officer, then can a Portlander place a complaint through the IPR process or not?
Not. So when the council created IPR, and then in subsequent revisions around 2003, 2004, council made it pretty clear that the role for kind of complaints in IPR is just the general cases. For officer-involved shootings and custody deaths, those are considered reviews in our city. Those happen just without somebody filing a complaint. And then IPR will hire an outside expert to review all officer-involved shootings. The slight revision to that was in 2010 when IPR was made a monitor of these types of cases. But someone cannot file a complaint on officer-involved shootings and custody deaths. So there is no CRC appeal of officer-involved shootings and custody deaths.
Can the IPR compel testimony from any sworn or non-sworn member of the Portland Police Bureau?
We cannot. We are not, this is an issue that's come up several times in 2010 and 2013. The opinion from the city attorney's office, and I think it's kind of the majority or consensus opinion out in the kind of employer-employee labor relations world, is that because IPR, we're part of the auditor's office, we're not in the chain of command of officers, we cannot compel them. We are not their employer. And so an employer-employee, if kind of world, like if you work for Nike or Intel, and,
Question.
yes.
Are other bureaus subject to that same exemption?
Within the city.
Yes.
To my knowledge.
If the Bureau of Transportation does something that is in violation, is there a condition under which it is the people in there cannot be compelled to testify because they're regarded as employees of the Bureau but not the city?
So my answer to that would be, so in the context of BHR, the Bureau of Human Resources, they can compel Portland police officers.
They can compel.
They can. They can. But when it came to the point of IPR getting that authority and code, the opinion from the city attorney's office, which I have no reason to doubt, was that, so the other part of that is the current status of IPR within the collective bargaining agreement is that we don't compel officers. So to change that, that would be a mandatory subject of bargaining. So council can, order or make changes as it wishes. It would have to have a conversation with the Portland Police Association and the PPCOA.
Yep. Okay. Thank you, Constantine. We appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys. Hang in there.
Yes. Give him a hand. Can we turn this off now? Oh, Amy, that's right. You've got a PowerPoint. I forgot. So Amy's going to talk about the development of the plan that we're working on with the Portland Police Bureau, the CEO plan, Community Engagement Plan for the Portland Police Bureau.
Thank you. So in your packet, and soon in a shortened version up on the screen, you have a 4-page plan for a plan, as it were. So the nexus of this document, it was something that I put an original draft together based on items that are called for in the settlement agreement as to-dos for this body. Also things that I had heard other committees mention as additional outreach that they would like to do. Reviewed this in depth with Jimmy Johnson, the chair of the CEOPS committee. The CEOPS committee spent most, if not all, of the last meeting digging into this, adding a finer grain of detail, which are in notes. And then the executive committee also took a look at it about a week and a half ago. This is the first time the full COAB is looking at it. I do want to go through it. It's a plan. It's not final. It'll always be sort of a living document that will guide this work. And I will note as well that the timeline is currently in discussion. Kokol had a conversation with DOJ this morning regarding can the timeline be extended a bit so this work can be done in a high quality way. And I think that's a open-ended conversation that will resolve soon, but it was very positive. There are a few deadlines in the settlement agreement that drive or drove original timelines for this document. One is that this group is supposed to review the results of the survey and additional public comment within 60 days of hearing that survey analysis. We're reading that as reading the Kokol survey analysis, which will be, about 6 to 8 weeks after the survey concludes, which is at least 8 weeks away from right now. So we do have some time to be reviewing that initial public input. After that 60-day period, COAB has 90 days to form recommendations for the police bureau. So that's really what the settlement agreement says, but there's so much more to it. So I'll walk through this plan. There are 6 phases outlined in the plan. The first one is an initial assessment. So the goal is to, in many ways called for in the settlement agreement, talk to the community, review existing community engagement and outreach efforts, talk to the police bureau, talk to the Kokol, talk to other people with expertise, whether that's community-based expertise, lived and experienced expertise, academic expertise. There's the community survey that is happening. The Community Engagement and Outreach Committee has talked about doing focus groups. This group has talked about doing focus groups and taking that survey to do a more in-depth conversation with the mental health community, with the LGBT community, with houseless individuals, and others. I think we've also talked about youth. There are a lot of groups of individuals that we would like to reach in a way that the scientific random community survey may not. Consulting with advisory groups, there are several outlined in the settlement agreement, including talking to the Human Rights Commission, or HRC, about the 2009 plan to address racial profiling. There are items to meet with precinct commanders, to meet with the police chief, to meet with the police commissioner, who's the mayor, to meet with members of ONI's crime prevention team, meeting with the COCL and going in depth on what COCL knows in terms of what other bureaus across the country are doing on community engagement will be key. We also need to review the annual report of the PPB's DOJ work. That will be out roughly September is what we have on the COAB's future work plan to review that report. So this assessment, I think the Community Engagement and Outreach Committee will really drive that work. A lot of those meetings will happen through their subcommittee meeting, but we'll make sure the broader group is aware of that and can engage as they'd like. I think some of those meetings will happen, specifically the police chief and the mayor, will have them scheduled to come to this group, so this group, entire group, can ask questions about community engagement. Then that initial assessment will be synthesized by the Community Engagement Committee, brought to this body. Here's what we've learned, here's what we've heard, here's what the survey said, here's what the focus group said, here's what this group said, here's what that group said. Based on that information, this group will have a conversation about a framework and a vision for the Community Engagement and Outreach Plan. So a very high level, what do we want this plan to achieve? There's two questions I have on here that we actually, Kathleen and I heard from the police chief that struck me as two ways to look at this. Certainly we can ask ourselves other questions, and those are a starting point. But what do we want the Portland Police Bureau to look like, and what do we want the community's relationship with the Police Bureau to look like? I think it's important to note as well that the Police Bureau is a part of developing this plan along the way. So I thought it was notable that those questions did come from the chief and may be the beginning of the basis for that framework and vision. So we do need to have more conversation with the committee about exactly how we're going to frame that conversation here. It's one thing to say, all right, COAB, come up with a framework and vision, and another to really guide that conversation so we get to a good product. Next slide. Phase 3, as you recall, we had an initial public hearing at the very beginning of this body's creation. That's because the settlement agreement called for 2 public hearings to be held within the first 90 days of this group existing to gather feedback on the police and community engagement. The second hearing, with the okay from DOJ to stretch out that timeline, we're going to have it after we have a framework and vision. That way we can go to the community and say, here's what we've heard from the survey, from focus groups, from these other pieces of the community. Here's what we as a COAB have done with that information. We've turned it into this draft framework and vision. We'd really love your feedback on all of that. So we're really giving the community an opportunity to wrestle with some of the issues that we'll be wrestling with and give some concrete feedback that I think will be useful going forward. The Community Engagement and Outreach Subcommittee talked about, we sort of got into an initial conversation about what is this hearing going to look like, and decided to set that aside until we know a little bit more from the phase 1 assessment. And then I think we'll have a better sense of whether it's, a significant presentation and then a lot of public comment, or small groups, maybe a tiny presentation in a small group. So stay tuned for deeper thinking on what that hearing will look like. We'll also, of course, post that framework and vision and the feedback we've heard to date on the web and take comment that way as well. Phase 4 is developing the recommendations to the Portland Police Bureau on the CEO plan. So that's where we'll, as a group, take that framework and vision, potentially refine it based on what we heard from the community at that hearing and through that public comment. We'll have heard additional feedback on, I think from the hearing, we also want to start to ask people, if this vision and framework looks right, and this is what we've been hearing from the community, what are some initial recommendations that should inform this plan? I don't think anyone here at this table can say right now how many recommendations we'll end up having. Could be 5, could be 10, could be 20. I think we'll start to figure that out as we do the initial assessment. There's also a piece called for in the settlement agreement about developing metrics to evaluate that engagement and outreach. That will be a paired process of developing those goals and developing those metrics. That will all go out as a draft to the community. Here's the framework, here's the vision, here are our draft recommendations. What are your thoughts? We'll get public comment back, and then we can finalize those goals and those metrics. Phase 5 is in the Bureau's hands. So those framework, vision, metrics, goals will be handed off to the Police Bureau to turn it into an actionable plan. The settlement agreement calls for putting together the timeline for implementing these recommendations. The goal, as we discussed at the Executive Committee and the Community Engagement Committee, is not to have recommendations that the Police Bureau comes back and says, we can't do these, or these just aren't going to work. So we want them to come along with the process as well to, with our advisory members on the COAB and with the other input that we're gathering, what is achievable. Here's what the COAB would like to see. Can that be done? Do we need to adjust it? Where do we meet that balance? And then the final plan, the actionable plan with a timeline, comes back to the COAB for approval. So the Portland Police Bureau will bring that plan to the COAB. That draft plan will go out for public comment. This group will look at that public comment, and then we'll take a formal vote on the CEO plan. The initial timeline had us doing phase 1 by September and getting to a final CEO plan by, I believe it was about March of next year. So we do want to build in, I think, a few more months to be able to have the time for this to breathe, recognizing that we don't want to, I think, take so much time that, it's ages before we have a CEO plan, which is so core to this group's work. Thank you. Happy to take any questions. I know a lot of folks around this table have dug into this too, and I don't want to be the only one speaking for it or answering.
Question in regards to when we do the planning around the next hearing, if we can possibly take a look at doing focus groups at the hearing this time and maybe grouping different topics within the focus group, and then within the groups prioritizing for the people who show up of how we conduct those focus groups, so that way we can address the issues that are most important for people that are there, and give them the opportunity to speak, to what they want to go over at the meeting as well. And then maybe we have some selected, our selected areas already, outlined, and then they can add to that conversation.
Yeah, I think that's a great example of the way in which that initial assessment will really shed light on the best way to have that public hearing. It may be that 6 or 7 themes emerge, and that's a perfect way to really go in depth on those.
Other questions?
A related question. When will the first quarter revised report be available to the COAB and to the community?
The report is available this week. It's been revised based on the feedback from all members of the COAB, from the community. I should be talking into this thing, right? Okay. Where else did we get comments? On the internet, or yeah, so we have all kinds of, and we've done our best. Some of those comments were more about things for the next report than this one, ways of thinking about it, and we certainly have made note of that. And but it should be available and posted.
I think Mandy and I have it in our email inbox, and last
Okay.
minute preparations for today prevented it from going on the web, but I expect it will tomorrow.
Okay.
It's probably also worth noting that the timeline for the next quarterly report has changed.
Right. So we're officially requesting that we're trying to coordinate better with the Portland Police Bureau, because part of what we were supposed to be doing is responding to their quarterly report. And they have structured it so they started at the beginning of the calendar year and quarters. And we kind of got ahead of that, and so our report, it makes it difficult for the information we're using in our report is kind of outdated. And so if we hold this off for another month or two, there's also so much work to be done here anyway. It's incredible. So then we will get their next report. And you, Mary Claire, when is your next report due? Or August 15th.
For the microphone, PPP will give that to you on August 15th, and then the draft timeline right now has COCL having the next quarterly report on or around October 1.
Yeah, so it'll all be much more coordinated as we move forward, and then we can comment on with the things that they've said in there with regard to their compliance with various paragraphs of the settlement.
As we're looking at that new timeline as well and figuring out when it comes to the COAB and when subcommittees will look at it and when we have the public hearing, it would be great to hear from this group and members of the public what worked and what didn't work with the process on the first quarterly report so we can get it better next time.
Revised report will be distributed. I know it's going to be posted, but if people want hard copies, how are you going to get it out to media, community-based organizations, et cetera?
So we'll send it out to the COAB email list, which is several hundred people and organizations. Anybody can call the phone number or send an email in to request a hard copy, and we can get one sent out. We hadn't talked about doing hard copy distribution of the final, but we could look at that. We talked about having a distribution list for the draft cycle to get public comment on it.
I think we might do better doing an initial distribution of the executive summary as, and then have people request the larger document. If we put them out places for people to read, I'm in agreement with sending it to everybody on our list. But the hard copies will be a little bit more difficult to decide where to put them. And instead of putting the whole copy there, if we can put the executive summaries there, which I think will address the issue that was raised last time about the length of the report. And so for some people, they will only want to read the executive summary.
It was helpful to have the first quarter report available at our meeting, the hard copy available.
Web, yeah. And I should clarify one thing. This issue of changing the time frame was only discussed today with DOJ, and although we have some input from the city, we want the parties to the settlement to agree to this change, and so we are going to officially request it, and nobody's approved it yet, but unless other people, hopefully you guys feel that's a good idea too. I mean, everybody seems to think it is, so.
Tom?
Since we're just slightly off topic, the Data Systems Use of Force Compliance Subcommittee had assumed that it would be handling accountability issues under the settlement agreement. And we've had discussions about our inability to do that because of staffing and the amount of work we have. And I'd like to make a motion in light of the amendment to the bylaws earlier tonight that the COAB establish an accountability subcommittee separate from the other subcommittees to deal with IPR, IA, the EIS system, the disciplinary system. You know, there's a lot of work there to be done, and it needs to get moving, and someone needs to take charge of that, and right now it's sitting, going nowhere.
Did you want to say something, Amy?
I was just going to note that per the bylaws that were just approved, that proposal should go to the executive committee to then bounce back to this group after discussion.
Then I'd make a motion to, waive that provision of the bylaw so we can get this subcommittee organized and moving.
Second.
Okay. Discussion? Good. Catherine? Oh, were you voting or were you seconding it? Okay. Any discussion?
Process it. Seems a little strange to me to waive a motion of a bylaw that we just passed.
I would note part of
feels
the
odd.
intent of that bylaw was to get a proposal that outlines the scope of the work and of the committee. So I think regardless of what happens here, that's work that needs to be undertaken of what will this group focus on compared to the other groups. If somebody would like to volunteer to take that on.
Not it.
Further discussion? Okay, I have a motion on the floor. It's been seconded. The second part is what we're voting on first. That is to waive the bylaws.
I think if nobody, if we're making a recommendation and then nobody's sort of willing to do the work, then I'm going to say that the recommendation shouldn't be made. So,
I don't even know what the scope is.
Right.
I think that's.
so I mean, if that's
think
a
it
new
needs to be
subcommittee,
looked
it
at.
should go, we should follow the bylaws and go back to the executive committee and think a little bit more
Yes,
about
sir.
it.
Okay, Jonas.
Member of the COAB, so I appreciate you giving me the floor. I believe that the city attorney's office should opine on the legality of this organization having bylaws and then taking a vote to waive them.
Yeah.
Because I don't want the situation to come up later wherein this organization says we're going to waive quorum or we're going to waive a requirement of the settlement agreement just because we feel like waiving it. If there are rules, follow the rules. I'm not giving legal advice. I work for the United States. I invite the city attorney's office to give legal advice if they like to this group. I think this group should look at its larger legitimacy by sticking by its own rules.
And again, I would support that sentiment, and that's what I was saying before you stepped up. Okay.
Oh,
Okay, I move to remove that motion.
Can that,
Second.
all right, wait a minute. We okay, whoa. Challenge me. Why don't you challenge me?
I think that's Robert's Rules of Order.
The parliamentarian. Okay.
Wouldn't you just vote on the
Will you
motion? and-
withdraw, will
Yeah,
you
okay,
withdraw the
vote on
motion?
No.
Okay.
Can you withdraw
Will
your
you
second?
withdraw the second?
So there you go.
The second
I
is
made both
withdrawn?
motions.
Huh?
I made both motions.
But you can't
I'm
say-
not withdrawing each of them. I think we should get the work done.
I heard that. Now, you no longer have a second for your motion. So that means the motion does not pass. It cannot be considered, okay?
That's fine.
Now, is there something left on the table that I'm missing? I think we're done with this part. I think it's better for us to go procedurally right now and try to learn what we're doing. Go ahead, Philip.
Can I get just a word of clarification? So there was no second for both motions? There were,
Any feedback from the phone?
Yes, I seconded it. Thank you for asking, I appreciate that.
V has seconded.
Okay. I'm going to go back to the question of, yes, come on, huh? I can't hear you. On it, now that we have the second? Yes, yes. The second motion, which was to waive the bylaws. Okay? Got it?
I'm a little bit concerned with a few of the things that have come up in this meeting tonight. We're here about police accountability and following procedures, but yet a few times tonight, people that are supposed to be giving recommendations on accountability have been waiving things. So I don't quite agree with things that have been going on tonight, and we're talking about accountability, we're talking about ethics, but yet we're putting in place guidelines and procedures, but then all of a sudden we're trying to go around them once again. I have concerns with that, and I am thinking that I'm having a hard time taking people seriously when they're supposed to be giving me feedback on accountability as a police officer, but yet I can't do that in my job, I'll get fired.
I hear you. We have an issue on the table. We have a motion on the table. Vote up or down, please. People in favor of waiving the bylaws.
So if the vote you take turns out to be illegal, we will address
Yes,
that issue
yes,
and bring
yes,
it back to the
yes,
COAB.
Yes, I do understand that.
It's important to know what that procedure would be.
Yes. Okay. And it sounds like it would be, since we haven't even had the review of the bylaws. Okay, so if you're in favor of waiving the bylaws at this point in time in order to be able to do something else, please vote by raising your paddle if you are in favor. Tom is raising a paddle, and I assume that you are raising a virtual paddle since you seconded the motion.
She said yes.
Okay, so the motion is defeated. The original motion was, can you restate it for me?
We can't waive the bylaws.
Okay, so doesn't count anymore, right?
I think it's a moot point at this point.
Okay. All right. Challenge.
Can I possibly have a vote count? Sorry to interrupt.
The vote count was 2 against. 2 for, I'm sorry, and everybody else against. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Because you don't vote. Okay? Anything else to be said on this issue? All right, where are we? Do you have anything else to say on this presentation?
It's 8:27. It may be worth noting the need to accomplish the work. There are 2 ways to move it forward to the executive committee. That happens in 2 weeks. One is a majority vote of a subcommittee. I believe data systems meets before the executive committee. The other way is for the COCL to make a recommendation to the executive committee. It could be useful to the COCL here to hear whether that's a sentiment widely held, worth moving forward.
But also, Amy, I would say that it's important as we make recommendations, and I agree with Officer Jackson, but as we make recommendations to do work, there needs to be capacity to do that work. So to just say it, to just be saying it, doesn't work for me. If you have a recommendation and you are going to roll up the sleeves to get it done, great. But to make the recommendation and then to ask somebody else to do it who's already overloaded, that doesn't work. So we need to be thinking about that as we make recommendations.
You still have your hand up.
I was just going to ask in general, what is the executive committee's thinking about whether there should be a committee for accountability, or that should be folded into the existing committees?
I think one of the problems is that has not been fully discussed. There's been no submission of a proposal that would describe the function of the committee, what its responsibilities would be, et cetera. And I think that's one of the problems of having that discussion right now. At 8:28, and we're supposed to leave at 8:30, and you guys are kind of hard on me about that. Bud, okay, quick.
Real quickly, Amy, you had said that any proposal like this had to come in through a subcommittee. In past, however, we have allowed COAB members to submit proposals to the executive committee via the forum directly, and then we've considered that as part of our agenda. So I'm thinking that process is still out there. Did I miss something?
In keeping with the bylaws, that proposal would need to be one to the COCL or to a subcommittee. Hey, COCL or subcommittee, could you create this? It's probably most efficient to just bring it to a subcommittee.
All right. Philip? Okay.
Yeah, I propose that we refer that to the executive committee. I move that we refer that to.
It's already been referred to them
Yeah,
because I did it.
yeah, it is.
Then why are we having this conversation
We're-
right now if, it's already been decided on? I'm not understanding
What needs to happen is a proposal for a new committee or a change to an existing subcommittee needs to come from the COCL to the executive committee or come from a subcommittee to the executive committee. So I think the next opportunity to do that via subcommittee is the data systems subcommittee on the third Monday.
Does that help? Is it clear? Okay.
Okay, yes, and that, yes, okay.
A lot
So
of
I
what's
could make
happened-
another motion that we go ahead and establish an accountability committee to the data systems group so they can decide. Can we vote on that now, right now, before
No,
the meeting's over?
We cannot. No, we cannot.
Why not?
Why not?
Why
Because
not?
we don't have an adequate proposal or process established, and it is 8:28, and it's not enough time to even have the discussion. So what we need to do is go develop the proposal, set the parameters up for that committee, then get it to the executive committee where you will decide whether or not you want to pass it on and become, set up that other committee. Can I get a motion for adjournment?
Before you adjourn, don't forget we have a final training on Tuesday and Thursday. I believe 6 of you are signed up for that. Mandy's gonna, sorry, it's the third round of the PPB civilian training. So about half of the COAB has already gone through that. And there are 6 of you signed up for Tuesday and Thursday. If that is a conflict, please let Mandy know, so we do have a short waiting list and need to confirm. Next meeting of the COAB, it is the second Thursday of August, which may be the 10th.
Yeah, I'll tell you in a minute.
13th.
We will continue to try to improve the time that the notices go out so that you get
August 13th, 5:30
earlier
p.m.
notices on the meeting and the agenda. So did I get I got a first and a second for adjournment? All in favor? Opposed? The meeting is adjourned.